fighting around government buildings in Damascus this morning. Local residents have told news agencies that armoured vehicles and roadblocks are in place across the Syrian capital. These unverified pictures appeared to show the Damascus skyline a day after the killing of 3 regime security chiefs. The rebel Free Syrian Army has claimed responsibility, and it's reported that President Bashar Assad has left the capital and may be in the coastal town of Latakia, where he's said to be directing an operation to avenge the assassinations. He hasn't been seen in public since those bombings. Well, let's speak now to Patrick Seal, who is a historian and Middle East expert, joining us this morning from Cannes. Good morning, Professor Seal.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Tell us your take on the situation in Syria this morning.
Well, this is a very dangerous moment for Syria and, of course, for the region. For Syria, if the regime were to fall, which is always a possibility, there would be a strong possibility of dismemberment. You may have noticed that the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, the other day, made a big speech in which he said precisely that the Western powers and Israel were trying to break up Syria, dismember it, as indeed they did with Iraq. In Iraq, as we know, a small Kurdish state was created, so the country is no longer united. It's a federal state. Now, in Syria, there's always the danger of Syria being permanently weakened by precisely the creation of a minority Alawi state in the northwest, perhaps followed by some sort of Kurdish statelet in the north, perhaps a Druze statelet in the south, and so forth. Now, some countries, Israel, of course, first among them, would like to see a permanently weakened Syria. So that is one big problem. Of course, the repercussions in Lebanon, where sectarian strife is there just below the surface, is also a tremendous worry.
And the UN Security Council resolution that is to be voted on later today in New York, does that have any bearing on anything right now?
Well, that is really part of the regional struggle between the United States and its allies on the one hand and Russia and its allies on the other. I mean, the Russians are totally opposed to the notion of the Western powers using force against the Syrian regime, which, after all, is perhaps its last foothold in the region. They feel they were betrayed in abstaining on the resolution concerning Libya, and that they opened the floodgates there for NATO's intervention. They believe that sovereign states should not be attacked from outside. And of course, they want to protect their own interests.
And the whereabouts of President Assad himself, of course, he hasn't been seen today. There's a lot of rumour mongering about where his family might be. He must be concerned, I suppose, after the attack, which killed 3 of his senior henchmen. He must be concerned about the security of himself and his family.
Well, I would say concerned is rather a feeble word for how he must feel. I mean, really, the whole of the top security brass was massacred by this terrorist attack, and which bears, of course, the fact that it was very probably a suicide attack, bears the hallmark of the jihadis, the sort of people who gave the Americans hell in Iraq by mounting a whole series of suicide attacks. I mean, the real problem is, of course, that the Islamists, the Muslim Brothers, and the jihadi allies flowing in from outside are the principal opponents of President Assad. They want to topple him, bring him down, hang him. And so they won't negotiate with him. They are totally against any sort of a peaceful resolution of the crisis, and he won't negotiate with them.
So what, in your view, is the best outcome that one can hope for today?
Well, you know, the possibility of a peaceful outcome is receding by the minute. Kofi Annan's plan is really in tatters. He wanted the international community, the West and Russia, to put pressure on both sides, not just the regime, but on the opponents of the regime as well, to honor a ceasefire and come to the table. That doesn't look at all possible for the moment. But that's what he's hoping for. He wants what he describes as a Syria-led peaceful transition, which really means giving a role to President Bashar al-Assad in leading this transition. But of course, the opposition totally refuses that and call for his downfall. Unfortunately, the United States has also adopted that position, which I think is simply feeding the civil war. They may come to regret it. They may come to feel that, or to realize that some of the weapons and intelligence and funds that are flowing into the rebels might end up in the wrong hands. You can't have a situation in which they fight Al-Khaldia and the jihadists in Pakistan, in Yemen, in Somalia and elsewhere, and support them in Syria.
It's an unremittingly bleak picture. Thank you very much, Patrick Seal.
Don't forget, for more detailed information on the Syrian crisis, you can go to bbc.co.uk/Syria. This is BBC News.
Where it's
Hi.
13 minutes to 11 and Syria is our top headline. Diplomatic pressure increasing there as hundreds more people are killed in fighting. David Cameron calls for political transition and says it's time for President Assad to go.
The cooperative group agrees to buy 630 branches from Lloyds Banking Group.